I'm 106 years old, and I need you to listen to me very carefully because what I'm about to tell you, I learned the hard way. I watched it happen. I lived through it. I buried friends who did everything right and still ran out of money before they ran out of breath. So before you close this video, before you decide you already know enough about retirement, I want you to hear one thing. The rule you've been told your entire life, the one your financial advisor swears by, the one plastered on every retirement planning website, the one your parents followed and their parents followed before them, that rule, it is quietly, slowly, and completely destroying your savings. And most people don't figure that out until it's too late to do anything about it. My name is Eleanor. I was born in 1918. I have watched this country go through the Great Depression, World War II, the inflation of the 70s, the dot-com crash, 2 housing collapses, and a global pandemic. I have watched people build fortunes. I have watched people lose everything. And after 106 years of watching, I can tell you with absolute certainty that the biggest financial mistakes people make in retirement have nothing to do with the stock market, nothing to do with bad luck, and everything to do with one rule that everyone follows without ever questioning it. And if you're anywhere near retirement, or if you love someone who is, you need to hear this, every single word of it. I want to start with my friend Dorothy. Dorothy was the smartest woman I ever knew. She was a school teacher for 37 years. She saved every dollar she could. She put money into her pension. She contributed to her savings account. She lived below her means her entire working life. When Dorothy retired at 65, she had more money saved than anyone in our circle. We were all a little bit jealous, honestly. Dorothy had done everything right. She had followed the rule. Now, if you don't know what the rule is, let me explain it to you exactly the way it was explained to Dorothy and the way it's been explained to millions of people just like her. The rule is the 4% rule. It says that when you retire, you should withdraw no more than 4% of your total savings every single year. The idea is that if you do that, your money will last 30 years, maybe even a little longer if the market performs well. 30 years, that was the magic number when this rule was invented back in 1994. Live 30 years into retirement and your savings survive. Perfect, simple, safe. Except for one enormous problem that nobody talked about back then. When William Bengen sat down in 1994 and ran the numbers that gave us the 4% rule, he was working with one very specific assumption baked right into the math. He assumed that the average retirement lasted 30 years, and in 1994, that wasn't an unreasonable assumption. The average American retiring at 65 in 1994 could expect to live, on average, into their mid to late 80s. 30 years of savings, 30 years of retirement. The math worked. But I'm 106 years old, honey, and I am not alone. The number of Americans living past 90 has more than tripled since 1980. The number of people reaching 100 has grown by more than 50% in just the last 20 years. Medical science is not slowing down, it is speeding up. There are researchers at Harvard and Stanford and MIT who genuinely believe that the first person to live to 150 may already be alive today. Whether you believe that or not, the trend is undeniable. People are living longer, far longer than any retirement calculator was ever designed to handle, and that means the 4% rule, the sacred, universal, follow it or fail rule of retirement, was built on a foundation that is crumbling right underneath the feet of everyone who is depending on it. Dorothy retired at 65. She followed the rule perfectly. She withdrew exactly 4% every year. She budgeted carefully. She was disciplined. She did not splurge. She did not panic during market downturns. She stayed the course just like every financial advisor told her to. And then Dorothy turned 92. And her savings ran out, not because she did anything wrong, not because she was reckless or foolish, but because she outlived a rule that was never designed to last as long as she did. I watched Dorothy in those final years. She had to sell the house she'd lived in for 50 years. She moved in with her daughter, which was a blessing, but it hurt her pride deeply. She had been so proud of her independence. She had planned so carefully, and the rule she trusted completely failed her in the most quiet, invisible way possible. Not all at once, not in a dramatic crash, but slowly, year by year, percentage point by percentage point, until one day the account simply said 0. That is the cruelest kind of financial failure, the kind you don't see coming because you followed all the rules. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, well, Eleanor, not everyone lives to 92. Most people won't need to worry about this. And you might be right about the statistics. But here is the question I want you to sit with for a moment. Can you afford to be wrong? If you plan for 30 years and you live 40, what happens? What is your backup plan? What is the safety net underneath the safety net? Because I promise you this, and I say it with the full weight of 106 years behind me, you do not want to find out the hard way that you outlived your money. It is not a gentle discovery. It does not come with warning signs well in advance. One year you're fine, and the next year you're having conversations with your children that nobody in your family ever wanted to have. So before we go any further, I want to ask you something. If this video is already making you think differently about your retirement plan, if you're already asking questions you hadn't asked before, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel exists for exactly this reason, to tell you the things that nobody else is telling you, the uncomfortable truths, the numbers behind the numbers, the rules behind the rules. You deserve to know this. And if you subscribe, you'll never miss another conversation like this one. Now, back to Dorothy, and back to the rule. Here's what I want you to understand about the 4% rule that your financial advisor is almost certainly not telling you. The rule doesn't just have a longevity problem, it has an inflation problem, a healthcare problem, a sequence of returns problem, and a lifestyle reality problem, all stacked on top of each other like a very expensive, very dangerous house of cards. Let me walk you through each one, because understanding this is the difference between a retirement that holds together and one that falls apart quietly while you're not looking. First, inflation. When I was a young woman, you could buy a full week of groceries for what it costs today to buy a rotisserie chicken. I am not exaggerating. In 1940, the average American family spent about $20 a month on food. Today, that same family spends $600. The world changes, prices change, and they only go in one direction over long stretches of time. The 4% rule was tested against historical inflation averages, which sounds reassuring until you realize that the years since 2020 have shown us just how quickly inflation can come roaring back in ways that no historical average ever predicted. When inflation runs hot, and it has, and it will again, your 4% withdrawal suddenly buys you 3% of what it bought you last year, and then 2.5% the year after that. The numbers on your statement stay the same, but the world around them gets more expensive, and the gap between what you have and what you need quietly, invisibly grows. Second, healthcare. Oh, healthcare. I have spent more money on my health in the last 20 years of my life than I spent on everything else combined in the first 80. And I have been remarkably healthy for my age. I am not unusual in this. The average American couple retiring today at 65 will spend, according to research from Fidelity Investments, somewhere in the range of $300,000 on healthcare costs in retirement, and that number climbs every single year. Long-term care alone, assisted living, nursing home care, in-home support can cost anywhere from $50,000 to over $100,000 a year. $100,000 per year. Your 4% withdrawal was never designed to absorb that. Nobody sat down in 1994 and said, let's make sure this rule can handle a decade of assisted living costs for a centenarian. They didn't think about us. They didn't plan for us. And yet, here we are. Third, and this one is subtle, but it is devastating, the sequence of returns problem. This is the one that destroys retirement savings so quietly that most people never even see it happen. Here is the simple version. It is not just about what your investments earn over time. It is about when they earn it. If the market drops significantly in the first 5 to 10 years of your retirement, and you are withdrawing 4% every year regardless, you are selling your investments at their lowest value. You are locking in those losses permanently, and the recovery that comes later doesn't save you because you've already sold too much at the bottom. The sequence of when good years and bad years happen matters enormously, and it is entirely outside your control. Two people can retire on the same day with the same amount of money using the same 4% rule, and one of them runs out of money 15 years in while the other is perfectly fine. simply because of the order in which good years and bad years showed up on the calendar. This is not a fringe concern. This is not a worst-case scenario that probably won't happen to you. The 2000 dot-com crash, the 2008 housing crisis, the 2020 pandemic crash, any one of these arriving in the first decade of your retirement can quietly gut a 4% withdrawal plan that would have survived just fine under better timing. Fourth, and I say this one gently because I know it's personal, the lifestyle problem. The 4% rule assumes that your spending stays relatively consistent throughout retirement. And I can tell you, from 106 years of living, that is absolutely not how life works. The early years of retirement, your 60s and early 70s, when you're healthy and energetic and finally free from work, those are not cheap years. Those are the years you want to travel. You want to see your grandchildren. You want to take the trips you postponed for 40 years. You spend more in those years, not less. And then in the middle years, spending often does drop as people become more homebound. And then in the late years, my years, spending explodes again because of health care and support and care needs. The retirement spending curve is not flat. It is shaped more like a smile, high at the beginning, lower in the middle, high again at the end. And a rule built around flat, consistent withdrawals was never designed to accommodate a smile-shaped reality. Now, I want to be fair here because I am not telling you the 4% rule is useless. I am telling you it is incomplete. I am telling you it was designed for a world that many of us are no longer living in. I am telling you that following it blindly, without understanding its limitations, without building any cushion around it, is the financial equivalent of driving across the country with only exactly enough gas to make it. If you never hit traffic, never take a detour, and the weather is perfect the whole way. And when has life ever been that predictable? Here is what I wish Dorothy had known. I wish she had known that the 4% rule was a starting point, not a final answer. I wish she had known to build what I call a second layer, not just a withdrawal strategy, but a replenishment strategy. A plan for what happens if you live longer than the math expected. A plan that accounts for health care costs not as a footnote, but as a major line item. A plan that buffers against bad market timing in the early years by keeping a portion of savings in conservative, low-volatility assets that she could draw from during down markets, so her invested assets had time to recover. I wish she had known that longevity is not a problem to be afraid of. It is a possibility to be planned for. And there is a very big difference between those two things. So what do you actually do? You've heard the problem. You understand that the rule everyone follows has cracks in it big enough to fall through. Now you want to know what the alternative looks like. And I'm going to give it to you simply because simple is what lasts. The first thing I want you to do is change the question. Most people ask, how much can I safely withdraw each year? That is the wrong question. The right question is, how do I build a retirement income structure that can survive a life that lasts longer than I expect it to? Those are two completely different problems, and they require two completely different approaches. The approach that has stood the test of time, and I mean real time, not 30-year back-tested simulations, but actual human lives across actual decades, is what financial researchers now call the bucket strategy. And I want to explain it the way it was explained to me years ago by someone who understood that the best financial plans feel more like common sense than complicated formulas. You divide your retirement savings into 3 buckets. The first bucket holds 1 to 2 years of living expenses in cash or near cash, things like money market accounts, short-term treasury bills, high-yield savings accounts. This is your breathing room. This is the money you live on right now. It does not matter what the stock market is doing. It does not matter if there's a crash or a correction or a panic. Your first bucket covers today's bills and this year's life. It does not go into the market. It does not fluctuate. It is safe, available, and boring in exactly the right way. The second bucket holds 3 to 8 years of living expenses in moderate investments, a mix of bonds, dividend-paying stocks, conservative balanced funds. This bucket has one job: to slowly, reliably refill the first bucket over time. It is not trying to get rich. It is trying to be dependable. It grows modestly during the good years. It doesn't collapse catastrophically in the bad years. And every year or two, you move money from bucket 2 into bucket 1 to keep that safety net fully funded. The third bucket is your growth engine. This is the money invested in a diversified, longer horizon portfolio, equities, real estate investment trusts, growth assets. This is the money that is meant to outpace inflation over the long run. This is the money that, if you live to 106 like me, is still growing in your 80s and 90s because you never needed to touch it in a panic. Because when the market dropped in 2008, you weren't forced to sell out of your growth assets to pay for groceries. You had bucket 1 for that and bucket 2 to refill it. Bucket 3 had time to recover, and it did. This structure solves the sequence of returns problem almost entirely. It solves the inflation problem because bucket 3 is growing and compounding. It solves the longevity problem because the system is designed to last indefinitely, not just 30 years, and it addresses the healthcare reality by allowing you to deliberately overfund buckets 1 and 2 in your later years when you know costs are rising. Now, I want to tell you the second thing, and this one is not about numbers, it's about mindset. The single most dangerous financial belief I have watched people carry into retirement is the belief that their financial planning is done, that they did the work, they saved the money, they set up the withdrawals, and now they can stop thinking about it, that retirement is the finish line, that the hard part is over. It is not over. It is different. The financial decisions you make in the first 10 years of retirement are more consequential than almost any decision you made during your working years, because now the math runs in reverse. Now every mistake compounds against you instead of for you. Now the stakes are higher, not lower. The people I have watched navigate long retirement successfully, and I have watched many because I have had 106 years to observe. They stayed curious. They reviewed their plan every year, not obsessively, not anxiously, but attentively. They adjusted. When healthcare costs rose faster than expected, they adjusted bucket allocations. When a grandchild needed help, they adjusted. When the market offered an unusual opportunity, they adjusted. They treated retirement not as a destination, but as a journey that required the same kind of engaged, responsive navigation as any other chapter of life. And they were never ashamed to ask for help. That is the third thing I want to tell you. The financial industry has, for generations, profited from making retirement planning feel more complicated than you can handle alone. They want you to feel confused. Confusion creates dependency. But the truth is, the fundamentals of a resilient retirement are not complicated. They are simple. They require discipline, not genius. They require patience, not luck. They require honesty about how long you might live, about what health care might cost, about what your real spending looks like when you're no longer working. Find an advisor, and they exist, I promise you, who is paid by you to give you honest advice, not paid by commissions to sell you products. A fee-only fiduciary advisor. Ask them directly, how does your plan perform if I live to 95, to 100? What happens to this withdrawal strategy if the market drops 40% in my second year of retirement? What is the healthcare buffer built into this plan? Ask those questions. If they shift uncomfortably in their seat, find someone else. I want to close with this. I've been alive for 106 years. I have seen more change than most people can imagine. I have watched technology transform every corner of life. I have watched entire industries disappear and new ones emerge. I have watched the rules of money get written and rewritten a dozen times, and through all of it, the one truth that has remained constant is this. The people who survive, financially, emotionally, in every way, are not the ones who followed the rules most perfectly. They are the ones who understood the rules well enough to know when the rules were no longer serving them. The 4% rule served a generation, and now the world has changed. You are going to live longer than that rule was designed to handle. Your health care is going to cost more than that rule ever accounted for. The markets are going to test you in ways that rule cannot protect you from, and you deserve to know that clearly, honestly, without the comfortable fog of just follow the formula and you'll be fine. You will be fine. But not because you followed the formula. You will be fine because you understood why the formula exists, where it falls short, and what you need to build around it to make it hold. Dorothy was my dearest friend for 80 years. She was brilliant and careful and disciplined and kind, and she deserved a retirement that lasted as long as she did. I think about her every time I have a conversation like this one. I have this conversation so that her story doesn't become yours. If this reached you, if any part of this hit somewhere real, please share this video with someone you love who is approaching retirement or already in it. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do it right now, because this is what we do here. We have the real conversations, the ones your advisor might be too polite to have with you, the ones the glossy retirement brochures never include. You deserve the full picture, and we are here to give it to you. I am 106 years old. I have earned the right to tell you the truth. And the truth is, you have more time ahead of you than you think. Plan for it, all of it.